So she ran an hour and .5 of personal time.
Yeah,
But
So it kind of just by coincidence.
very well, wow.
Coincidence worked out. There is indeed.
oh, did you? You would. Oh, well. All right. Now I don't know if I'm going to see kids.
No.
Which I heard Oxnard Unified called the
right
hot
now,
dates for the children.
I never.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 2 p.m. Let's get started. So let's do roll call. I think we have everyone here except Marcia. So full board meeting. Thank you for making the time on a 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, short notice. So welcome, everybody. I just want to explain really quickly why I'm chairing the meeting. Marcia Croninger, the board president, is away on a pre-planned vacation, and this was in her absence, the vice president, which is myself, is acting president. And when Anthony called me yesterday morning to talk to me about some of the issues we've been facing internally in the college, my first thought right away was to schedule this emergency special meeting to discuss the topic of what's on the agenda, repealing board policies 1300 and 3150. So that's what we did, and I thank everybody and Anthony for getting this all together. I know this is a contentious issue, but let's just keep it respectful and civil. I think we'll get through it, and we'll all be positive at the end of the meeting. So thank you. Next thing is public comment, but we're gonna save that until the item. There's a general public comment usually, and then the item's public comment. So we're gonna move, and we don't have any public comment, I think, from anybody who's for any other issues. So we're gonna just move on to 4.1, which is governing board, repeal board policy 1300 and board policy 3150. And we're gonna start off with a report from Anthony on it, and then we'll go to public comment and then to the board.
Thank you, Jonathan, and I too want to welcome everybody here this afternoon. I appreciate that. Appreciate your interest in this topic. I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about my recommendation to the board to repeal board policies 1300 and 3150 and sort of frame the conversation a little bit. But before I do that, I also want to make sure that I thank you, Jonathan, for showing leadership and stepping up and calling this special board meeting to address this topic. We need to get some sort of resolution on this matter sooner rather than later, so I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, these two board policies that were passed at our last regular meeting have caused considerable unintended consequences and disruption at the college, which takes away from what it is that we do best, which is teaching our students. One thing that I can guarantee you all is that these two board policies have probably been reread and read and reread again and scrutinized and probably speculated about more so than most other board policies that the college has probably ever had. But they certainly have been a topic of discussion at the campus the last few weeks. And I just wanted to share a couple of my thoughts and concerns about these two board policies and why I'm recommending to you their immediate repeal. And let me start by making some comments about board policy 1300. Now I know for a fact that the board did not intend to cause any ill feelings on the campus with this board policy. And I remember specifically when the idea of putting together the drafts were contemplated, that the furthest thing from your minds was causing any kind of contention or problem at the college when you were putting this together. This is particularly true related to the broad student body that we have and the very diverse student body that we have, and your commitment to that broad student body. I think this commitment is really best captured very eloquently in your words in Board Resolution 17, which I wanted to read just because I think it is so apropos here. Santa Barbara City College District has a mission dedicated to the success of each student and is committed to serving all students, and I want to repeat that, is committed to serving all students who can benefit from a post-secondary education without regard to race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, immigration status, age, gender, language, socioeconomic status, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, medical condition, or disability. This is a really important statement on your part, and I know that you as a board as a whole and individually, as I've gotten to know you the last year and 4 months, each are very committed to this statement and believe strongly in it. And we certainly at the college appreciate that very much. What you heard, at least in part, on October 12th at the board meeting was a team of dedicated faculty representatives and academic senate leadership expressing in their own way that they too believe very much in that statement and are committed to the tenets of that statement, supporting the broad student body of diversity that we have, and as a fundamental spirit and culture of teaching and learning at SBCC. This is the ethos of the college, and it's really an important aspect of why this college is as great as it is. The commitment to a broad student body with all of its diversity permeates the entire college, including classified staff, managers, faculty, all supporting student success and equity. So your important commitment and feelings in Resolution 17 are exactly in sync with the spirit of the college. The problem arises, however, when a board policy promotes the classification or parsing of our diverse student body in favor of one group over another. This can have the effect of, in many cases, defeating both diversity and equity. Given that we have so many different types of students here, we've got DACA students, veterans, disabled students, in-district, out-of-district, African-American students, Latino students, gay, straight, transition students, and so on and so forth. To single out any one group over the rest flies in the face of our shared statement of serving all students. That was so eloquently put in Board Resolution 17. Now, I know for a fact that this was not the intention of these board policies or the intention of Board Policy 1300 in any way, but some have construed it to be that way, and their perception could be that way. And as we know, perception is reality in many cases. The Academic Senate leadership who spoke on October 12th don't view students as a classification, but they want you to embrace that all students that we have here at SBCC are ones that we want to support and focus not on their classification, but on their success. And I agree with them. I believe you do too. And so I request that BP 1300 be repealed. Now, I also want to say a little bit about BP 3150. The two primary items of BP 3150 relate to a board response to the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, or FCMAT for short. And I know that the board felt obligated to be responsive to FCMAT recommendations, which is what BP 3150 is attempting to do. As part of the 25-page FCMAT report, the chief financial analyst herself, Michelle Giacomini, recommended directly to you that you needed to approve a high-level policy on the college's size and a related enrollment management strategy considering growth opportunities. She went on to say that enrollment and efficiency and productivity must be a part of that enrollment strategy. These recommendations related specifically to closing the fiscal deficit that we're dealing with and helping the college balance its budget. And now, it's common for colleges to have enrollment targets and efficiency goals. However, as I said at the last board meeting, and I indicated to you that it is not usual to have specific targets such as we have included in a board policy. Optimal size is set as a target to manage to, so we can live within our means. And Dr. Jarrell, the Executive Vice President for Ed Programs, has pointed out that all colleges have some kind of enrollment target that's based on college funding, which is capped by not us, but by the State Chancellor's Office. Like most things, enrollment management and efficiency are complex topics. They're not so much complicated topics, but they're complex topics. They have multiple variables and variables that take time to understand. Given enrollment management and the responsibility of Dr. Jarrell as the Executive Vice President for Ed Programs, he is facilitating a faculty work group to explore and understand these variables more fully. And for all of these reasons, and because these variables may be best contained in other strategic documents and/or administrative procedures, I am also recommending that BP 3150 be repealed. I want to say just a little bit about the board policy development process. The current process for updating BPs needs to continue in place and be respected. And we haven't changed that at all. I mean, we're looking to continue forth with that process that has worked for, well over 4 years that I know of, and is really primarily focused on updating board policies with revisions that we get from the Community College League of California. What is needed now is a means by which we can get good input from the constituency groups on campus regarding new board policies. And that's one of the areas that we ran into a little bit of trouble with these particular board policies, which is why I wanted to bring that up. So while there's been lots of discussion and talk about timelines, I would continue to encourage the board to be flexible with board policy development. I know we have you've developed a 60-day turnaround time for those, but you've also indicated that there is some flexibility in terms of summer and other extenuating circumstances where that timeline may get broken. One last comment related to community. In all of my many discussions and presentations in the community and in our service area, I have always been impressed with the high esteem in which this college has been held. I'm sure the same is true for you. People, no matter, it seems, what walk of life they are taking, when I talk to them about Santa Barbara City College, they like to tell me that they're related to Santa Barbara City College. They're related in that maybe they themselves have gone to college here, or maybe that it's their children or grandchildren that have attended the college. Or maybe it's that nobody attended the college, but they're believers and supporters in education and give to the SBCC Foundation in support of our students. They're proud of this relationship with the college. They're proud of what it is that our faculty are doing, our staff and administrators are doing, and they're proud of what you're doing for the college. One of the things that struck me at the last board meeting was Professor Stark's comment about her having a long-term commitment to the college and that her children had attended here. That's exactly the way that people talk about this college when I talk to them in the community. And none of what we are talking about here today diminishes the reciprocal feelings about our commitment to our service area from Carpinteria to Gaviota and how we feel about this beautiful community. So with that, I end my comments.
Thank you, Anthony. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna go down, we're gonna do public comment, my mistake, first time. So first up on public comment is Dr. Priscilla Butler from the Academic Senate. And public comment is set at 5 minutes per speaker.
We can't see you very well up here because of these lights, but we know you're out there.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Beebe. First, I want to express appreciation to the board for considering repeal of BP 1300 and BP 3150. As Dr. Beebe just summarized, these two policies have been the source of a lot of contention and controversy, but I want to clarify that that began more than 2 months ago. In my role as Academic Senate President, I'd like to summarize some of the major concerns that we have about these two policies. BP 1300, local service area emphasis, has gone through multiple revisions, and each one has been an improvement over the last, which I noted at the last board meeting, but some of the fundamental concerns still remain. The first is that the board policy is not necessary. We have existing board policies that already address issues of access and success. These include BP 1200 mission, which cites who we serve, what programs we offer, and the Education Code section 66010.4, which authorizes these functions. In addition, BP 5052, open enrollment, states every course section, or class reported for state aid, wherever offered and maintained by the district, shall be fully open to enrollment and participation by any person who has been admitted to the college. Even the legal brief that was attached to the discussion of this item at the October 12th board meeting asserts, quote, and I would like to note it's on the final page of this document, in the case of admissions, a community college must admit any California resident and may admit any non-resident possessing a high school diploma or the equivalent, and cites Education Code 76000. Aside from there not being a need for this policy, there's also concern about what it implies for the readers of the policy. The word local is repeated a total of 8 times in less than 1 page. There are additional references that mean local, including, quote, for district residents, end quote, and, quote, residents within the district service area. When we have brought forward these concerns previous to this, both in private meetings, small group meetings, at BPAP, and in other venues, the response that we have received is, how could anyone read it that way? When I have gone to department and division meetings to hear feedback on this policy, I've heard terms like, and these are quoted terms, discriminatory and xenophobic. The appearance of isolationism, localism, and preference for some students over others has struck at the hearts of the faculty and staff who serve all of our students. At the October 12th board meeting, I already spoke at some length about the process issues involved. The board president at that time stated that our internal processes were no longer valid and that plenty of time had been given to review these policies. If our processes are not legitimate, then these policies have not actually been through shared governance as defined in BP 2510, participation in governance and local decision making. My comments about BP 3150 will be succinct, I hope. Fundamentally, the 2 main areas outlined in this policy are the size of the college and an efficiency target. According to a policy expert at the Community College League of California, there is no other California community college that has a board policy like this one. The college itself is in the best position to determine its appropriate size and its efficiency targets, and has in fact been working on this and made strides to address the budget issues behind them as they relate to both topics. The original October 2016 projections of a $9 million deficit in 17-18 a $12.7 million deficit in 18-19, rising to a $20.8 million deficit in 2021, have largely been turned around. Current projections, last presented to the board in August 2017, show the deficit gap as being significantly slimmer, $3.2 million in this academic year, and through the measures the college is adopting, eventually balancing in 21-22. These changes did not happen outside of our shared governance processes. Faculty, staff, and managers have served on CPC work groups and on the Budget Resource Allocation Committee, which has directly addressed budget concerns. The Senate Subcommittee, Planning and Resources, regularly reviews the budget and provides feedback on budget matters. We are part of the solution and will continue to work on the issues that our institution faces. To have targets is certainly a reasonable thing, but these rightfully should exist in college documents, such as the Educational Master Plan. One last area I'd like to address is about how these two policies, if they were to exist together, would actually work against each other. There is a conflict in them in that those of us who've been working in California community colleges for longer than a decade are aware that there are many external factors that affect enrollment which are outside of our control, one of which is unemployment, immigration factors, and the number of students at feeder high schools. Though we are now in an enrollment downturn, there will come a time when enrollment will rise. The implied cap on enrollment referenced in BP 3150 does not appear to recognize that we can't deny access to students who have already registered, yet local students are often the ones who register later than others. They are the ones who often hold multiple jobs, have family obligations, and a myriad of other situations they are managing, which make planning their schedules in advance a challenge. If our local students register late, but our classes are full because of an artificial cap we have placed on our college size, BP 3150 could very well harm not just all students, but also specifically the local students BP 1300 seems designed to protect. We cannot supplant those who are already registered in existing classes. Having said that, I do want to reassert that the fundamental concept behind our concerns around a BP 1300 is that we as faculty, and I can't really speak for staff or administrators, but it's my belief it's true for them as well, that we all serve here so that every student who comes to us has every opportunity, has access to classes, has access to all of our support services, and to separate out some group and imply that other groups are not welcome, it really goes against the very heart of what we are all here to do. Because our existing policies already address the legally mandated issues of students served by our system, because the policy language in these two suggests a negative stance towards students not from the Santa Barbara district, and because these policies have not followed the full process for review, we agree that they should be repealed. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Next up is Monty Mason. Again, 5 minutes per speaker, please.
Thank you. A little background about myself. I'm retired. I graduated from this school. I practiced law in LA for 23 years, civil trial work. Tried everything you can think of. You're my jury. I taught at this school for about 10 years, adjunct, and that's been some years ago. And I want to suggest to you today something to give close attention to. I understand Sacramento is on your case. You have to be right with them. At the same time, you have to be right with what seems like an intractable situation. I have settled many, many cases, 95% of the cases that go to the Superior Court, answer ready for trial. At loggerheads, 95% of them settle. You develop a sense, the judges develop a sense. Let's try compromise, and this is what I suggest. Do not mandate the cap. I'll call it the student cap formulary. Don't mandate it. Rather use permissive language that the board recommends that so-and-so be considered as best practices by the administration of the college. Best practices, that is not mandatory language. This alleviates obvious conflict. Now, what do you do, or what will you lose if you do this? Right now, if the administrator, the president, should run into a problem and he doesn't follow the board mandate, then what you would do ordinarily is say, if not, why not? Now let's assume that the board's is not mandating, but suggesting as best practice. What would you say to a college president if he did something else? You would say this: if not, why not? You lose nothing. You're going to ask the same question, have the same power, and have the same interest, and you're going to take away the heat of the perception, as pointed out, that you are jamming things down the throat. I would also recommend, as a practice to be recommended, that if you should hit that cap, I don't know that you hit it yet, that the board recommends as a practice, perhaps not best, that the students be stacked in order of application and they be admitted in regular course with a seat if someone else drops out who ordinarily had preference, and be able during that interim to take the course online. It doesn't mean that you're going to recommend it, that they do it. You're going to suggest that they look into it. That's all. It gives some place for somebody to go, and at the same time, you're not breaking the cap. You're putting them in a stack, in a row, and you'll take them, and you can do something about giving them coursework, giving them credit for it online, so that they don't walk away disappointed. But my first recommendation for a settlement on this matter, the board should recommend as best practice the adoption of the cap formulary on the student population. That is not mandatory, and it's going to take the lid off of this boiler. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. And the final public speaker is Paul Jarrell.
Good afternoon, Dr. Beebe, members of the board. You got it.
So restart your timer.
All right, great, thank you. Forgive me for reading a prepared statement. I wanted to stay on task a little bit. You know, I think it's safe to say that over the past 2 weeks, we've all spent a good bit of time assessing the outcome of the last Board of Trustees meeting and trying to resolve what we feel is truly best for our institution. You know, when I was sitting to try to figure out, in my mind, what would be best, or a recommendation I could make to you, I felt the need to remind myself and I think ourselves, of what this institution really is. Santa Barbara City College is not a collection of buildings. It's not a collection of degrees and certificates, nor is it simply a schedule of classes. Santa Barbara City College is not a spreadsheet with ending surpluses or deficits. Santa Barbara City College is also not an FTS or an efficiency target. This institution, Santa Barbara City College, is a collection of incredibly talented and dedicated people. Our students are some of the best that you will see at any institution of higher learning. We have such a talented and diverse student body, and one I'm very proud to represent. I thoroughly enjoy the rare opportunities I have when I get to have conversations with students. While our students come from places such as Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Goleta, Ventura, Paso Robles, LA, Oakland, Arizona, New York, Georgia, England, Brazil, Nigeria, China, and Sweden, only to name a few, when they arrive here at SBCC, they're not in-district or out-of-district students. They are not resident, out-of-state, or international students. They are Santa Barbara City College students. They are our students, and they are all welcome and supported here. In addition, I've had the fortune of working with a lot of wonderful employees of Santa Barbara City College. This is also an amazing group of dedicated, hardworking people. Over the past year, our managers and classified staff have been working to continue to meet the needs of the college with a much reduced working staff. It has not been easy, but they are working diligently to maintain the high standards of this institution within those limited means. We need to take the time to recognize that and support that. Our faculty have also worked very hard over the past year to manage their programs and keep their standards high in the face of declining enrollments and budgetary shortfalls. This also has not been easy. We have reduced the schedule. We have encouraged willing faculty to do their best to add students where they can to meet the demand. This has no doubt had an impact on our faculty. They are working harder. They are managing more students than they are used to. And they are engaged in trying to be part of a solution, not part of a problem. In addition, I want to recognize that there has been significant impact on our adjunct faculty, as there are fewer sections to assign, affecting their livelihood. We also need to take the time to recognize and support that. Last week, I was asked by a faculty member, why did I come to Santa Barbara City College? I didn't have the opportunity at that time to answer that question right then, but I think it's important for me to remind myself of the answer. I came here because this institution has a rich history of innovation, creativity, and collegiality. All of the creative programs and innovative faculty and staff we have show an incredible dedication to the success of our students. We cannot forget that. That is worth working hard for, and I'm proud to be part of that culture. We do have challenges, no doubt about it. I've presented many of them to you, and we believe that they're there. There's no question in that. I have always been one to not back away from a challenge, but rather to look at challenge as an opportunity. I lost an opportunity at the last board meeting. I lost the opportunity to defend this institution, to defend its people, and especially my apologies for not being more direct in my support of our students and faculty at that meeting. So we need to ask ourselves again, what is best for this institution? While we remember what this institution really is. Board Policy 1300 and 3150 are not best for this institution. They are divisive, misplaced, and jeopardize the culture and ultimate success of this institution. I thank you for your time, and I urge you to support Dr. Beebe's request to repeal these two board policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so back to the board. What we're going to do is we're going to just go down the line. Each of us will get a chance to speak.
Want a motion first
No,
before discussion?
before the motion. Let's get the temperature of the board, and then we'll do a motion. So, would you like to start?
I think it was Harry Truman who said, when I make a mistake, I correct it and move on. And I think that's what this board is primed to do today. I really appreciate Paul's words and Anthony's comments earlier, because I think we did act precipitously. I think there is a solution somewhere embedded in these policies. I think everyone should know that they were not enacted out of malevolence. They were acted upon as possible solutions to a very real problem. I think we made real progress in terms of reducing the prospect of a deficit, but we still have a deficit, and we're still working on it. So what my hope is that we will agree to the rescission of these two policies, and then begin the hard work of figuring out how best to cope with the balance of the deficit that still is out there.
Thank you, Peter. Marty?
I also feel badly that we passed this and that without, you know, it wasn't without the discussion on campus, because there was a discussion, but really without it coming to a good conclusion. And so that's not what we're about up here. It broke my heart to hear people say that because they're not local, they didn't feel welcome. And I guess that's the implication of Board Policy 1300. But from my point of view, and I think all of us up here, I feel like we're dedicated to the success of all the students, whether they're local, out of district, or international. And I think all of the students enrich our lives in many ways. So it's too bad that's what happened when Board Policy 1300 was enacted, but I can see how it was. It was misinterpreted like that. So I think we need to maybe move on, repeal it, and come back if we have something that would be more welcoming to everybody. And then Board Policy 3150, I think the confusion I still have, I don't want to go into it, but it's, you know, I still have confusion on it, and I ended up voting no last time because of the confusion I had in my head, and it's still there. And so I'd like to see us, I'm going to be very interested to see the discussion, because we do have this deficit, and we need efficiency. Our efficiency numbers should go up. So the idea that this is divisive is really too bad, because we should all be working on this together. And I think the only way to do that is to repeal this and then everybody work on the issue. So I will be supporting both of those.
Thank you, Marty.
Sure.
Craig?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that's been said here today so far, but I have my own take on it. And as a trustee,
Is it on there?
I did turn it on, and here I was having trouble hearing a couple of the other speakers. As a trustee, I don't disagree with what's been said here today so far at all, but I have my own take on it. And there are people that will watch this that voted for me to be here. And there's some tenets of like leadership, and it's not just the people sitting on the board here that should know about these. Anybody in a position on the faculty that leads a dean, anybody that leads anything, in fact, anybody that has contact with students or some kind of a leader. And one of the tenets of leadership, and there's a little bit of a list of them, one is when you enact a policy or go to enforce something, and you find out that what you were doing didn't have its intended effect, is to have the courage to back up and start over again, and to try to change it and make it right. There's what I've witnessed here since the board meeting, and I didn't have this feeling before the board meeting, and there was a little bit of discussion, and some of it was quite good and helpful, but a lot of the points that have been brought up since our last board meeting were not brought up at that board, and at least some of the trustees on this board were not necessarily versed in those opinions or ideas. And what I felt happening after that board meeting and over the past 10 days or so is a perceived attitude on my part of an us versus them type of idea going around, and that was distressing enough, because that's certainly not the intention of this board. The board's intention was to lead forthrightly and out front and to help set goals, not to tell you, the faculty or the president, exactly how to enforce them or how to go about it. That's their job, but we wanted clear intentions. Unfortunately, what we worded wasn't clear, but it was viewed and out there, and this was not when we voted for it, it was not the first reading of it. I hope, and I have every confidence to believe, that we will continue to deal with this deficit situation, and we have some other issues to deal with that are occurring as a consequence of the deficit situation and are dealing with that. So I would like there not to be an us versus them. If you have ideas, if you have points to make, and Priscilla made some good points today, and then she had some points that I don't disagree with, or probably because I don't fully understand a couple of her statements, but 90% of what she said, I loved it. I'd really like to see what this college has a history of doing is working together to solve problems rather than an us versus them mentality, and I would hope that that doesn't continue. Because I don't know anybody on this board that takes that view or has that opinion. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Veronica?
So thank you, Dr. Beebe, for bringing this recommendation to us, and I want to recognize your leadership and really, more than that, the soft skills around that in terms of your humility and your character. I think that your tone has been very respectful and very appropriate, and that is a hard thing to do. Same thing with Cornelia. I appreciate her comments. I appreciate her request and her position.
Priscilla, you mean Priscilla?
No, Cornelia.
Oh, Cornelia?
Yeah, I mean, she
Okay.
didn't speak, but I
Okay.
heard her.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I'm talking about tone and
Got you.
how she could. Well, she's a mathematician, so I think she kind of thinks very linear that way. It's a skill. In doing my thinking of this, I stumbled across the University of California's Transfer Action Team report. And, they put out publications. I searched through the league website, and really, it's information for policy-making bodies to gather dipsticks around the state. And one thing that they talked about in the report is they have different outcomes. And it says the first is greater student diversity. Here, the team focuses on increasing enrollment from California community college campuses that send few students to UC, as well as on students from groups traditionally underrepresented in higher education, including low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented minority students. They go on to acknowledge some of the facts and comments that we've heard here on campus, acknowledging that increased enrollment of non-resident students serves many important purposes for UC and California community colleges, including the benefits that students from different backgrounds and perspectives bring to the classroom. The Transfer Action Team nonetheless believes that UC should continue to prioritize state residents and that efforts to streamline transfer should focus on encouraging more California residents to enter UC via the transfer pathway. So that made me think of our policy in saying UC is supporting all of their students, but they're recommitted to the master plan and they're recommitted to the economic well-being of California. So when I read what we passed for 1300, it says we support all students in addition, and it outlines our businesses and the economic development we want to see and certain populations like the UC report. I also went through our website and I found, because now I'm a property owner, so I see my taxes and I just got my tax bill. So I found the Measure V ballot, and this is the $77,242,012 $12 in bonds, that by now it's really closer to $90 million after taxes that we're gonna see on our tax bill till at least 2039 by the time this is paid off, because it's like a mortgage. And so when this was presented to our community in 2008, or to pass, and this is anybody who calls Santa Barbara their home, anybody who's registered to vote, which many of our students move here, they call Santa Barbara their home to register to vote. It said Santa Barbara City College improvement measure to maintain quality, affordable, local higher education at Santa Barbara City College. In implementing the facilities plan, the Board of Trustees determines that Santa Barbara City College must take every available step to preserve access to a high-quality, affordable local education and career training programs to meet the changing needs of local residents. So when I got to thinking about some of the discourse that has been happening on campus, I thought, I wonder why seeing local in a board policy stirs up a different emotion than seeing local when we're asking for $77 million, now over close to $90 million. I don't know why that's the case. As far as BP 3150, I know none of us have talked about caps or, I don't know, the different, again, discourse and examples that are coming up. It's a target. I hope we have the problem of having too many students, and we'll revisit. I still stand with the position that I trust Dr. Jarrell's recommendation that it should, that how this is suspended and it won't be implemented, that they'll work it out and they'll come back. Where I stand right now is that I cannot withhold something from this community when I have the ability to act here now. And I will not tell this community to come back tomorrow, and that we'll talk about it tomorrow when this policy is here for them today. So for those reasons, I will be voting no to not support the repeal of both policies.
Thank you, Veronica.
You're welcome.
Marianne?
This is a much more complicated issue than it looks on the surface. It's a complicated issue because of questions of the support services for students who come to this college, including housing and health and many other things, if they come from outside the community. On the other hand, it is also true that students benefit from going to college with students who've had different experiences than they've had. So one could make a very strong case that in fact we should increase these numbers and go out after more students. Or one could make a very strong case that we should take these numbers and put them in concrete and never grow another student. It sounds simple on the surface, but it is not simple for this community. They will be living with whatever we decide for quite a few years, and it will have an impact on the overall quality of education in the community. The first thing that I would like to support is the idea of whatever numbers are used be goals and not policies. By making them policies, which we did, we made them sound like they were in concrete when, of course, that's not how populations work. They ebb and flow, and we will need to be more flexible than this sounds. So the suggestion of some of the speakers about just what they're called is a good idea. We should not make them policy. On the other hand, at one time in my role on the trustees, I was responsible for chairing a finance committee. And one of the things I learned about that is that if you don't set some kind of goals on numbers, what you're going to end up with is either no money or not enough money to adequately educate the students that you take because you don't have goals. So clearly it is important for this college to establish numerical goals for where we should aim in terms of enrollment and in terms of the shape of enrollment. I obviously, and I think all of us agree, expect any community college to pay immediate and deep attention to the applications of students who live within the community college boundaries. On the other hand, I also recognize that having only students that live within the boundaries is not always productive for the students in the community. They also need to learn to deal with people who have had different experiences from different places. I'll support either changing these to goals rather than statements of demand or something that we absolutely have to do, or I will support simply dropping them and trying again to establish numbers that we view as goals. And I don't care which of those we do, but I cannot support these as policies.
Thank you, Marianne. David?
Yeah, I just want to thank Anthony and Jonathan for scheduling this meeting. I also want to thank our students, Education Without Borders in particular, and the ASG for organizing the rally. I think what happened was that faculty and students stood up and they asked, what does it mean to have local character? I'm from Georgia. I'd love to have some local character. Where can I find it? That's the kind of perception that we see. The other question, will we be the only community college to have a optimal size of 15,000 or any optimal size at all? So I think what happened was we educated students, faculty, members on this campus. We organized them and eventually mobilized them. I think this is a lesson for our students, and I think the faculty are very much aware of how these movements work from the past. I think now is the time to build a special and deeper relationship with our students and faculty. The perception, in my view, is that this board is out of touch with our populations on this campus. That's the perception. That may not be true. And just a couple examples that aren't really related to this board policy, but I think they do shed light on this perception. We had a mayoral debate actually right in this theater, and one of our students, who I think is in the audience right now, couldn't get in to the debate. It's projected that only 400 millennials will vote in the mayoral debate, so that kind of hurt a little bit. Another example is that there's AC in this building, and it was pretty empty about an hour ago, and there's no AC where there are students that are studying. So what I'm basically trying to say is this perception is molded not from one policy or two policies, but from a system. So what I would say is I appreciate the board taking this first step to healing and building this stronger relationship. I think now is the time, and I think tomorrow will be the time to come together. I think we need to treat our students as if they are local, even if they're from a different area. And I think we need to welcome them with very, very big open arms, as was done with me by the faculty here for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm going to say a few things, and then Anthony has something to say. I also want to apologize for my voice, and maybe I'm really sick, and the Dayquil's wearing off. But what I want to say is, it's unfortunate how this all happened and how it all ended up. It is a learning experience for all of us. This is always something that's in progress. We did rush implementation of these policies. I thought it would have been good to wait a little more to implement them, but this has also been a discussion since February, so I think, we could have all done better. However, I want to say, at the end of the day, the goals of these policies are somewhat sound, very sound. I mean, fiscally, we need to have a stable budget. There's no college if there's no budget. And like Marianne says, I'm learning finance class right now. I just got out of class to come here. You need to have a goal that you plan towards. Without a plan, nothing really works. And I think That is why we're in the financial situation we are now, is because there was no clear financial goal. And if that is now encapsulated in another way, not a board policy, last time multiple people discussed the educational master plan is where to put that kind of detail in, let's do it. But I'll vote no on an educational master plan that doesn't include anything like this in the future, because I think we've recognized we need some sort of planning. In terms of a local or area focus, there is a very big difference between the millionaire's child from Los Angeles and the kid who grew up in Isla Vista. And focusing on one and over the other, not even over the other, but focusing on one and their success and their access to college that's not discrimination. You wouldn't, when I was a student at UCSB, the Black Student Union made a big push for the institution to focus on the needs of those students because there weren't enough at the university and they weren't graduating as much as other students. When the university went in and met the demands of the students and helped Black students succeed better and did X, Y, and Z to do so, that's not discriminating against white students or anyone else. That's that's equity, not, that's what we aim for, and that's what I view as the purpose of this place. We extract property taxes and use those property taxes to give people an opportunity to go to higher education. Some people cannot move to Los Angeles from Santa Barbara to go to college, and that's just the reality. So I think that we really need to have, if it's not a policy, we need to have an actual plan for how we're gonna directly benefit and make sure that the students who grew up in Santa Barbara, many grew up in poverty here. Santa Barbara has a perception of being rich white land. It's not. There's a lot of people here who grow up in abject poverty, and we need to have a way to address their needs because that is one of our biggest focus. So those are my comments. Anthony, do you want to say your part?
I just want to make sure that we are always talking about apples and apples on things. And when we start comparing the enrollment management strategies for the CSU system or the UC system, it's completely different. It's a completely different mission. CSU's taking the top 15% or whatever of their applicants, UC taking the top 10%. And in community colleges, we take the top 100% of all of our applicants. The most unique and distinguishing aspect of our mission is that we are an open educational access college. We work not to screen people out like the UC and CSU system work so hard to do, but we work to screen people in. We work really hard to get them into the college. We want them to be successful, and so many times the college, the community college, is not just their first chance or their second chance, but many times it might be their last chance to be successful in their lives, and I think we always have to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Anthony. So I'd like to entertain a motion to repeal board policies 1300 and 3150. Peter? So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, Marty, thank you. Discussion on the motion, or we can vote. Up to you all. David?
I very much agree with you regarding our local students and our underserved students. And I think that's the point which we can all agree on. The perception that came from this was that we are not accepting, and of course that's not what the board meant. But I think that we could have a policy, and I think we will have a policy that will emphasize helping those who cannot afford to do as well. So I totally agree with you, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Anyone else on the board would like to make comments, or if we're ready to vote, we can do.
Jonathan, but I can't help but think, I remember when we were discussing the vision statement, and I was saying to you guys, I don't know that my students, or my daughter who's a student, or me as a parent, how do I know that when issues are presented to the students, that the students are receiving both sides of an issue? And so in this case, I don't know that the emails I see on my daughter's pipeline, she's being presented both sides of the issue. And that's something we talk a lot about. You're not going to censor media, and so it's like, how do we make students check their sources? How do you make them critical thinkers of information in all modalities? And don't think that repealing without having something else, I'm more comfortable with, no, we don't repeal, but give me something else. Go to work to this institution that we all love, that we're all volunteering to serve. Go to the table, bring something, and then we'll repeal this. But to just repeal with nothing else, without socially conscious citizens coming to the table to see both sides of all facets of this, it does not make sense to repeal and then have nothing.
Peter?
Well, for me, it's sufficient that there is considerable concern, there is some ambiguity, certainly confusion, and that would be sufficient for me to vote to repeal. To repeal now and to come up with a better policy at a later time. I believe there already is in place a process chaired by Dr. Jarrell to engage the faculty, to engage constituent groups in crafting something that is more effective and that will address the issues that you're legitimately coming up with.
Don't you think it makes more sense to just suspend?
Well,
Because you don't have to implement?
Suspend, repeal. I think that I would rather, frankly, as a statement of good faith, I think we need to recall. I mean, I've been a member of this board now for a long time. I didn't think I'd ever say that, but I will. And there have been times when we've had really a very contentious board. And contention between board and faculty, and I don't want us to go back to that. I want us to see each other as partners with the same objective, and the objective has to do with student success. And if by repealing this, we can move together forward, I think that's sufficient for me to raise my hand and say yes.
Thank you, Anthony. Oh, thank you, Peter. Anthony has something to say.
I appreciate what you're saying, Peter, and that makes a lot of sense to me. One of the things that, Veronica, you're saying that's important is that as I think Priscilla pointed out, many of these tenets are already encapsulated in many of the things that we're doing, and the things that aren't in those particular BPs or APs will be demonstrated in some other form, some other strategic document, maybe an AP, something that's appropriate. So, I don't want you to get the impression that everything that you're talking about here is going to go away, because in fact we're already doing a lot of this. And I think that was one of the points that was brought up at the last board meeting, is that in terms of enrollment management, efficiency, those kinds of things, we've already been working extremely hard on that part of it. So this is redundant in some ways. And so I want to assure you that the things that are in here are being taken care of, and they're being handled by the college administration, staff, faculty already in many cases. And I think that was one of the kind of points of contention, was that it was taken as such that we're not doing this. We're not doing the things that are mentioned in there. And that's simply not the case. I just wanted to make clear that point.
Thank you, Anthony. Craig?
Yeah, I have a few more words, and I'm going to speak mostly to the taxpayers, which just about everybody in this room is probably. We spend the money that we get from you taxpayers, and some of us here are here primarily to make sure that it's spent appropriately and that goals are in place. And I don't think any of us necessarily, there are a few exceptions at this table, envision ourselves as being professors here, or head administrators, or maybe experts at anything that this college has to offer in the way of educating students in a whole huge variety of fields. But the one thing we are charged with doing is not to do the work, but to oversee, direct, to watch what's going on, and to set policies. We're a policy board. That's what we can do. I hope that those that didn't like the policies, and I'm not sure that I like the policies either, but again, we have to hold ourselves accountable in some way, and we need to have clear goals and targets to aim for. And that these goals and targets need to constantly be adjusted and changed according to changing circumstances. A few years ago, this board, we had at the time a finance committee, and I served on it for 4 years. And we were trying for the last few years to be able to get a forecast of where we were going, especially when we saw signs that the student population was falling off a little bit, that enrollment was going down. And we kept asking for a multi-year forecast, and it wasn't forthcoming, and we couldn't seem to get it. And finally, we got a new president, and we got those forecasts. And that's just what they are. They're a scientific, well, a swag we used to call it in business, a scientific guess. And we got those numbers. And to not plan when you have some kind of an idea of where you're going and what could happen if you don't plan for it. Some of us board members, and now we don't have a finance committee, so every member on this board is watching it. And we're trying to find a way to avoid, running off of a cliff here. And we feel that responsibility to the students and the taxpayers. And we share that responsibility with the faculty and staff here. And emotionally, and I guard against this because I don't like to bring emotion so much into it, although I admire it at certain times. I really emotionally want to vote with Veronica and not repeal this. Why? Only because, not that I believe it's perfect at all. And could it have been done different? Undoubtedly, it probably could have been done better, especially with hindsight. But to not provide the leadership that we are responsible to provide is dereliction of responsibility. And that I will not knowingly commit. And I don't think a member of this board will. Nobody on this board wants to be adversarial with anybody. We want shared governments. When I came on this board 5 years ago and Lori Gaskin had just been hired, we vastly increased at least the perception, and I saw in actual action, a transparency in the way this college was run. Maybe the pendulum swung a little too far one way and the other. We'll find out with hindsight. Don't have that hindsight yet. But it swung, and there's more transparency. Let's keep it going. Don't drop the ball. We're all responsible to each other. I'm really disappointed that since February this board didn't hear those objections, those points brought up like by Priscilla today, for example. I would have loved to have heard that, a month ago. We might have come up with a slightly different policy. Or we might have done something different if we had more alternatives available for us, and that's maybe our fault. We didn't put in enough hours to develop more alternatives. But you guys are the experts at this college. We ask you and we rely on your information and your feedback, maybe too much. We need that feedback. You don't get to make the final decision, but what you do get by law, and Dr. Beebe wrote a paper on it, so if there's an expert that knows the law, that would be Dr. Beebe. And I have his paper right here. And I referred to it frequently since I got my hands on it. By law, there is shared governments. That doesn't change who makes the final decision, but it mandates us to listen and to share and to pay heed to and to provide opportunity. And I don't think that we've been derelict in doing that. So we're going to try to do it better. And we want this transparency to be there. We want honest discussion all the way along so that we don't run into these kind of roadblocks. And I guess the good news is this, is we have a problem right now. Man, if we didn't do anything, if we weren't taking any action, if we were being derelict in our responsibilities of running this school, if we weren't doing a good job around here, we wouldn't have run into this problem, for a fact. Nobody's trying to do anything wrong. We're just out in front. So let's work together. Let's fix this. And I will, this is to the taxpayers, I'll repeal it, but I won't forget.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Anthony?
I just want to make sure that people are aware that obviously things that took place during a different time are not relevant to what it is we're talking about today, with a whole set of variables and circumstances that weren't in place, during a prior administration. So I want to respect the decisions that were made in prior administrations and not disparage them.
Thank you, Anthony. Anyone else? Oh, David.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, Craig. But what I would ask is, do you understand where some students come from when we see local character? What does that have to do with taxes? And so it's the perception, I think. I understand that, of course, the community pays for this college. These buildings basically belong to the community, of course. But there is a perception that I think we should shy away from, especially considering our political climate right now.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to say? I just want to say one last thing on the shared governance piece. I used to be the guy who was clamoring to get a seat at the table because students were often left out when making big decisions for a university. So by us hopefully repealing these today, I hope everybody comes to the table and participates in the process to meet the goals that we still need to have. So I think we're ready to go to a vote. Do we want to do a roll call vote, Angie, please?
Trustee Abud?
Yes.
Trustee Kugler?
Yes.
Trustee Hasland?
Yes.
Trustee Bloom?
Is it me? Aye.
Trustee Nielsen? Trustee Nielsen?
Yes.
Trustee Gallardo?
No.
Student Trustee Pambechi?
Yes.
Cool. Motion passes. The policies have been repealed. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Peter moves. Do we have a second? Second. Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day in an afternoon.